law enforcement and collaborative working relationships, and so look forward to working ever more closely to ensure that we have equity and justice for all. I'm Zan Rose, Commissioner. Nancy? Commissioner and Vice Chair.
Pat Malone, Commissioner.
We can't hear you, Joe. Worked a minute ago. Okay, Joe Kirby, County Administrator, can't get his volume working quite yet.
Risa Farley, Board of Commissioners staff.
Erica Bible, Board Reporter.
Good morning, Kate Portia, Corvallis County Economic Development.
Audio seems pretty low.
So we also have with us Andy Ablett from the Juvenile Department, Jasper Smith from Developmental Diversity, Sherry Gates from the Board of Commissioners Office. And it looks like Joe is leaving and will return, hopefully with sound. Are there any other announcements? Any comments from the public? We have no changes that I'm aware of to the agenda. Commissioner Wise, Commissioner Malone, any additions that you would like to make to the agenda? Okie dokie. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I have, during our round robin discussion, I would like to bring up a matter related to this Invite Me program at Council of Governments, and then we can discuss that then. With that, I would happily take a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve our agenda.
Second. All in favor signify with an aye. 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 Okay, thank you. The first item on our agenda today is the quarterly update from the Economic Development Office of Kate Portia. And welcome, Diane, as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having me. I think I'll be fairly brief this morning. I feel like I wanted to spend most of the time just going through with you what I believe is the final draft of the details of our work plan for the next couple of years. I think you're getting pretty good regular updates from us in terms of the work that we've been doing through the pandemic. That continues to go very well, and I think we were just in front of you last week, so I'm not going to go over all that again. I did just this morning send to you all, as well as Joe and Mary and Teresa, this kind of working document. We appreciate your grace as we're kind of trying to balance our emergency response work with, this other work of working on this work plan. That's a lot of work words. And I wanted to just highlight a couple things, because I know we chatted about this a couple weeks ago. We're bringing it back, so we're really just narrowing down these projects and work components for you. Most of it is the same as what you saw before. We've just refined it slightly. And wanted to let you know a couple things about that. So again, this was an email attachment that I had just sent this morning that you'll find in your inboxes. One of the items that I wanted to indicate, and I think I hit on briefly, but I continue to work really closely with Sean McGuire. I know he's working on this kind of new normal and how Benton County is going to respond and come back from the pandemic. And so we've taken recommendations that he heard from the survey work that he completed and have made sure that our work plan is hitting on those items that he identified through his survey. So I wanted to be explicit about that in the grid. So you'll notice that either focused areas or specific work items that relate to his project, I've marked with an asterisk so you can see where that crossover is occurring. And
can you hold on just one sec? I believe that we have some mics on. And Andy, you might be the culprit. Would you mind muting your mic? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I also, we're working with a lot of folks because, of course, we work across the county, but then we also incorporate our work with the city. So items that are in the city's current year SOP are denoted with a little kernel, and those will change because I think what we're going to do is continue to update the SOP. But I wanted to give you guys a flavor of items that are in these different buckets. This, of course, again, is just the main. It's really the heart of our work plan. When this is final and complete, you will see the fluffier version that includes the graphs and the narratives, but I feel like that's not really the heart of the part that you guys care about. So I'm really just bringing back to you the work piece. Our team is continuing to work on the narrative pieces, and we're tying that up here in the next week or so. So in terms of the different focus areas, those haven't changed at all, those large buckets. There's just a couple items that I wanted to highlight and bring up because I think they kind of preview the work that we plan to be doing over the next couple years, and one is maybe an update of some potential really good things to come. So I did want to let you know that in Focus Area 1, green, this is revitalize, support, and grow existing businesses. Under that top item of continuing to assist hardest hit business sectors and business owners, we did add, it's bullet number 3, about working to elevate downtown businesses. We acknowledge that in our current plan, and I wanted to be explicit about it in this plan as well. For us, that's all the downtowns, and you'll see later, of course, there's a project related to our friends in Adair Village about helping them get going with an urban renewal district and creating a downtown out of whole cloth. But this is also about supporting our existing downtowns in Philomath, Monroe, and then also our work that we're doing to support the BCA. So we want to be explicit about that occurring. Further down, so under the third item under Focus Area 1, bolster businesses in target and emerging sectors, I have added a new sub-bullet under food and beverage, and I wanted to kind of let you guys know about this. It is still early days, but I was able to share with Commissioner Ojero the other day. We heard back from Senator Sarah Gelser that one of the 3 economic development projects that we had proposed for ARPA funding coming from the state legislature did make her short list, and this funding was related to a food hub in South Corvallis. I know this has been discussed many times before, and I guess I wanted to bring this up with you all because we included that item. And the purpose of it was really the lens is through the potential for business development, but also community support. You know, the idea being that we have a potential location where something like this could go, talking about food incubator, kitchen incubator space where small businesses could begin to cook and grow, store their food. There's a really excellent model down in Cottage Grove that's worked very well where they've got shared cooking space, storage space, but then they also have a retail component. They also have a food truck component. So here's the really exciting part I wanted to share with you guys. When I added this project in, I put it in at $600,000 with a potential match from the Urban Renewal District. So again, this is still early. It has made her short list. Those funds have not yet been approved, but I wanted to be explicit about acknowledging that should that project come to fruition. We think it could be incredibly exciting. We know it's something folks have talked about and wanted to acknowledge that should it come forward. So let me pause there because I feel like that's sort of some big exciting news, and I just wanted to see if anybody had questions on that.
Kate, on the food hub, do you anticipate having local partners in that endeavor?
Indeed. And so, you know, I wrote this really broadly, and I think the short answer is yes, absolutely, because this has been, food hub has been thrown around, and I know there are a lot of different lenses on what that could look like. But yes, on local partners, I think there have been conversations with different entities, the university, the potential for the extension service, different businesses who are already playing in that space, such as the co-op, has talked about this. So Yes, absolutely is my answer. And I think should this funding come to fruition, the first step will really be to work to wrap our arms around who the partners are, gathering folks and understanding the scope of this project. I do think it's important to say this is a project that can't be everything to everyone. I think I understand that Food Hub means different things to different folks, right? So I really put this in, selfishly, but through the lens of economic development, through business development, and community development to some extent. What I don't see this being is a site that is an enormous warehouse for food donations. There may be the potential to partner and to bring in Lynn Benton Food Share, and I know they're looking for new space, but that is not this project per se. And so I just want to sort of, I think from the beginning, it will be really important to level set expectations. I will say too, Seth Sherry over in Albany, who I know you guys know, he is steeped in a background of agriculture and food production. He and I were chatting about this. He worked for a company that is a consultant for communities that want to create food hubs. Like most things, there's good ways to do it, to set yourself up for success, and there are ways that may sound good but may not really spell out success long term. So he suggested reaching out to those folks, Commissioner Malone, and so that's kind of on my list too, is really maybe starting with a feasibility study, understanding and putting some sideboards on this so we can be really clear about specific goals and vision for this project, because I think it could be prone to scope creep.
Okay. My other question is kind of coordination with the fairgrounds and the new commercial kitchen that's ready to go out there.
Yes, indeed. We're interested to hear about that, and I have not had a chance to talk to Lynn about that. One of the things that, and I apologize because I'm not clear on it, but I was understanding that the commercial kitchen that's out there will also be used for folks who rent space at the fairgrounds. Is that correct? Right. So I think there is a potential for some crossover for kind of ad hoc use of that space, but it really does become a little bit problematic for long-term businesses who consistently need the kitchen, Monday, Wednesday, Friday to prepare for their food truck or whatever, because then if you have someone who comes in and leases the space, that would supersede. Anyway, all that is by way of saying, totally, I think there's a potential to work with Lynn. I plan to talk with her and see how we can not duplicate the space that's available at the fairgrounds and yet complement with the two of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds great. And what was the name of the Albany person that you're?
Oh, well, so it was Seth Sherry, who I talked about, who is my counterpart in Albany. Seth used to work for the COG as well. You guys may know Seth, and I can email you. He recommended the name of this firm. I was going to meet with them just to understand what they do. Not necessarily that I will go with them, but just to know that there are folks out there who help communities think about the creation of food hubs in a way that will make them sustainable. And I think that's really the key. Rebecca Weinsteiger and I met on this, and she shared with me the story of Nedco's attempt, as we all down in Springfield, which was wonderful. I mean, they did many things right, and ultimately they still couldn't make it go long term and ended up selling it. So I think this is a project where we're going to have to be very thoughtful and purposeful in order to create longevity.
Well, great. This is a exciting development in a year when you never quite know what's coming. But,
Indeed. No, I was very tickled and had done my due diligence to put some projects. I put 3 different projects on the list, and funny, this one was sort of a shoot for the moon. And when she said that was the one that made the short list, I thought, oh my, this is amazing.
well, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so let me move on just a little bit, just as to a couple more additions on this grid. Under focus area number 3, expansion of buildings and infrastructure, I changed around the wording a little under cultivating manufacturing space. For us, what we are hearing, and I had a conversation with one of our local commercial realtors, and he's actually going to do up some data for this because I wanted to kind of truth test my gut. And he agreed with me, but then also said he could get some hard data to show that what I'm thinking is correct. We really, as we've talked about, we have a need for small-scale manufacturing space. We've got the university, the community college, retired brilliant HP folks and others who are building these businesses in their garage, which is awesome. And they come up with it, and then we don't have a place for them to land, right? So I think I wanted to be explicit about the creation of small-scale manufacturing space, but then also this larger project, which is a long-term one, but this continued potential to work with the university and look at a location, a feasibility of a larger scale research industrial park. So that is, the idea behind that is a part university, perhaps part government, part private sector venture where, we have space for these folks to expand. One item that I added on the work list for that was talking with developers about the creation of possible space. My friend and colleague, John Stark from Redmond, who is brilliant, many years ago did a developers tour, and he invited developers from all over the state to come to Redmond and show them that they had space, they had a list of businesses looking for space, kind of gave them the cost-benefit argument, and ended up getting 3 new industrial buildings built out of just inviting folks in and saying, hey, we need this. So I think there's a lesson out of his playbook that we can steal and begin to have those conversations. Other than that, the remainder of the work stays the same. And again, I think you all know, but the reason we're really wanting to take some time to go through this with you is these bulleted work items, along with the narrative that'll wrap around it, will be the attachment to our 2-year contract that'll be coming before you. So as we talk about next steps, as I said, our team is going to finish that wraparound narrative and the graphs and basically, make it look attractive and beautiful. We want to bring that back to you then with a slightly updated version of the contract, which I will work with Joe and Mary and Teresa on. There's just some very minor modifications to make. And what I'd like to do then is plan to bring that back to you all prior to the end of June for a final review. And let's see. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure that sounded like a good plan of action as we look to head to the finish line on this next strategic plan work.
Well, sounds like a good plan to me. Comments from my fellow commissioners?
Sounds like a good plan, Kate.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, no, so we'll bring that back, and I realized too that in the middle of all this, I do also owe you guys it's funny, we had already done it, I just haven't sent it, but we do have a report for you that just updates and outlines our totals and work done through the 3rd quarter of fiscal year 2021. And so I'll email that to you along with a few reports that I've got from the partner organizations, and you can peruse that at your convenience. But we'll plan to be back in front of you prior to the end of June, and we'll get this all wrapped up.
Hey, I would like to ask one further question, actually. As you bring up partner organizations, one of the things that's not noted in here specifically is the role of partner organizations. And I do have the benefit of the conversation I had with you, but just so that all are aware where we're headed and there, could you please speak to that point?
Yes, thank you so much. And I meant to write that down on my list and forgot. So thank you for the prompt, Commissioner Ogerow. So yes, in regards to the partner organization, and for those who are watching, our office helps to manage a small amount of funds that we pass through to external economic development partners. In this current biennium, those partners include the Small Business Development Center, the Corvallis Foundry, and Oregon Rain. We are in the process of reviewing their proposals, and after giving some thought, I realized that I think the best way to bring a complete package back to you guys is to put together a small work group And so we've put that group together. It's comprised of 2 EDAB members, one from the city, one from the county, to give that rural perspective, as well as a representative from Business Oregon. And they, along with me, we will be reviewing those proposals, and we'll bring those back to you with a specific recommendation of direction related to that. And again, while we manage this money for you all, I have always seen it as your decision as policymakers. I'm here to be the intermediator and help manage the contracts and look at the reporting and things like that. But I truly feel this is ultimately your decision, as it is the county's money. And I want to make a recommendation, but then trust you all to move forward as you see best. So thank you, Commissioner Ojero, for bringing that up. The plan will be to bring that back also prior to the end of June.
That sounds good, and ideally, we want it to be complementary and supporting of the goals that you've enunciated here that meshed with the city and county strategic visions. So hopefully they will.
Yes, thank you, and that's exactly what we're looking for. And I also heard loud and clear in previous meetings, complementary to the work and the lens through which we're doing this work, but then also avoiding duplication, I think, is really a key criterion upon which we are going to be evaluating these.
Excellent. Other questions for Kate?
Yeah, Kate, you mentioned EDAB, and that's hasn't met since the pandemic started. Do you have what's your sense about that group getting going again?
Thank you so much. So we have gotten to a space where I think, as you all know, the city has approved their reorganization of our advisory boards. And EDAB is a multi-jurisdictional board because we contain a handful of county members and in addition to city members. We are basically now in a space where we can start back up. And what my goal is for that, Commissioner Malone, I would like to have that group meet at least twice a year, if not 3 times a year. We had a larger meeting that we had taken on, which was, as you guys may recall, the old EVP, or Economic Vitality Partnership. Mike Corwin used to run those. This was sort of that 5,000-foot level partners. Steve Clark from the university, I know Joe Kirby would attend those, our EDAB group and others, to kind of share broadly the work across the county that's occurring and use that time to kind of cross-pollinate on the different projects. So we will still be convening those, Commissioner Malone. And then the thought with EDAB is really to then bring them in on an ad hoc basis as there are projects that we're working on. We may do smaller work groups related to the different projects that we have in our work plan, whether it's agritourism. I would be putting together a work group where perhaps Jason Bradford from the county could be a part of that because he has such a wide breadth of knowledge, and that they act and help advise us, the staff, as we're working through those projects, if that makes sense. So I think in my mind, this is going to get a little bit away from we were meeting 9-10 times a year, every month, into more of a active roll up your sleeves, work on discrete projects and help staff work through these, but for the 2 or 3 times a year that will bring the broader audience together to share what's going on.
That sounds good to me. It's, I think, worthwhile, at least occasionally, bringing a larger group together just to see who the players are. Sometimes there's turnover and somebody leaves, somebody else takes their place, and just see who's involved.
Indeed. Yep. No, completely agreed. And I cannot, I know I've said it before, you guys, I'm like a broken record, but through the pandemic, if it has taught me one thing, it is that the relationships that we had in place and the continued cultivation of those relationships are what's critical to making successful economic development work happen in our county and in the region. It is at the heart, I suppose, of so many, of all the work that you guys do across the spectrum, but it's those relationships, that collaboration, those connections are at the heart of that, Commissioner Malone. And I think those meetings are exactly the opportunity to share and have some of the entrepreneurial folks be like, oh, I didn't know the university was doing that. Great, let me talk with them on the side, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Great.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Kate, thank you for bringing this back around to us, and we'll look forward to seeing it one more time towards the end of June and moving forward.
Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on our agenda is to discuss developmental disability and the ADA checklist proposed by Dr. John Gottschall and his colleague Diane Scottolini from ARC, and Danielle Brown is co-hosting this discussion as well. Danielle, do you want to lead off and then or more formally introduce John?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to take the moment to introduce John and Diane as members and representatives of the Mental Health, Addictions, and Developmental Diversity Advisory Committee. John is prepared to present today on the DD checklist, which is something that MADAC's been working on for a number of months in order to finalize a conversation with commissioners, with you all, about the potential recommendation, the recommendation from MADAC that the county begin using a checklist in developing agenda items for to ensure that the DD population is appropriately being addressed in the agenda items. So again, this is something we've been working on in MADAC. Gosh, it seems like about 8 months. So I will turn it over to John and Diane for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Teresa, could I present? Sorry, folks, I'm just getting oriented here. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Argaro, Commissioner Malone, and Commissioner Weiss, also other members. Thank you for inviting the disability community to your meeting today. I sent you some information yesterday which provides context and is really the information that we share with people that we onboard to what we call a disability resource team. It would take about an hour to go through that, but I think it's really useful context. It describes a problem, and the ADA checklist is a solution. So we wanted to spend most of our time today on this solution. This presentation is 20 to 25 minutes long. We'll leave plenty of time for further deliberation and discussion. My name is John Gottschall. I've been a pulmonary and critical care physician in Benton County for 28 years. As a clinician scientist, I've been curious over the last 5 years with how justice care and health care treat people experiencing disabilities. Along the way, I've learned some powerful lessons from justice and disability rights colleagues. I'm sharing this ADA checklist with you as a tool to illuminate the blind spot we have all experienced for developmental and other disabilities. I believe sharing information like this is how we build trust, fairness, and really community. This presentation is specifically in support of my partners at the ARC of Benton County, the Disability Equity Center, and the Benton County MADAC, and also our state and local disability resource teams. Andrew, Jasper, and Danielle are all members of that disability resource team. We really appreciate your time and attention. Personally, I'm calling in a favor today. I am a Benton County native. I met my spouse as a student at OSU. 22 years ago, we adopted identical twins living in Benton County who were experiencing special needs. They were born at 27 weeks gestation with a birth weight of 2 pounds each. They spent their first 3 months in the neonatal care unit. Shortly after discharge, their biological father shook one of the infants so hard that blood came out his eyes and ears. He shook him because he was crying. We adopted those kids at age 3.5 years. They were in the 5th percentile for weight and the 10th percentile for height. They have lifelong developmental disabilities and delays. Through foster adoption, we joined tens of thousands of people in Benton County who are part of the disability community. We learned the special kind of hell and high water that people endure as part of the disability community when the people they love are excluded or exploited. We've learned that people experiencing disabilities do not have special needs, they have human needs. My son put it another way the other day in response to some news story. He said, "Dad, there's nothing wrong with having autism." Indeed, there's nothing wrong with experiencing a disability. The ADA is a safeguard for those human needs for the almost 17,000 Benton County residents living with developmental disabilities and the 24,000 residents experiencing any disability. So I am personally asking Benton County to firm up the anti-discrimination, inclusion, and protection requirements of the ADA by routinely using the ADA checklist. Introductions. Please let me introduce you to the checklist manifesto, How to Get Things Right. This is written by Dr. Atul Gawande, who's a surgeon at Harvard University. He described how checklists have saved millions of lives around the world in medicine, in construction, in transportation, and in government. The ARC of Benton County is loaning our commissioners a copy. It's a long-term loan. It should arrive with Commissioner Argaro by today. In our intensive care unit, we use a checklist while rounding with a multidisciplinary team on critically ill patients in the ICU every day. It is one of our most effective procedures. It prevents complications. It's also very efficient. We typically cover 23 essential elements of care in less than 3 minutes for each patient. Gawande showed that a checklist used prior to surgery saves lives when used across the globe, and cited several other checklist efficacy studies in his book. The benefits of a checklist are measurable within a few weeks and are sustainable over years. At the end of this presentation, I hope Benton County will start using a simple checklist to ensure compliance with Title II of the ADA. This presentation is based on resources submitted prior, which preview developmental and other disabilities. I hope you've had time or will have time to read it and keep the reference links. In this presentation, we'll follow the road to Title II of the ADA. Then we will review Title II compliance in Benton County, just 2 examples, that contain both a blind spot and a bright spot. We'll use the ADA checklist to show you how to get Title II right every day. Title II of the ADA is a law applicable to all state and local government entities and is enforced under the power of the 14th Amendment by the U.S. Department of Justice. The ADA protects people with disabilities from discrimination based on disability. The ADA applies to all services, programs, and activities. Please notice that the word accommodations is not on this slide. Neither are accommodations found in the purpose statement of the ADA itself. Accommodations are merely tools for achieving the ADA's purpose of anti-discrimination, inclusion, and protection. The ADA is a way of thinking. It is not brick or mortar. Accommodations are merely tools for achieving the anti-discrimination requirement. The quadruple aim is a useful tool modified from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. It contains 4 pillars which I use to inform administrative decisions and process design, including this ADA checklist. First, one strives to achieve improved experience by consumers, whether we label them patients, citizens, clients, or neighbors. Improved experience can be measured with quality and satisfaction measurements. We also attend to improve health and safety of populations. In the justice sector, this applies to suspects, survivors, witnesses, and families alike. At the same time, one attends to reduce per capita total cost of services. Here's an example. We know that incorporating early accommodations reduces the cost of subsequent services. When we think about the sequential intercept model, that first investment in time may seem annoying, but it saves time, money, and misery later on. If our systems provide the necessary but relatively inexpensive time and communication accommodations needed by people experiencing disabilities up front, we can reduce the excess incarceration, assault, and homelessness rates we currently pay for later. Finally, I believe in considering whether our processes also show improved worker satisfaction, resiliency, and joy. I believe routinely considering the ADA will improve recruitment and retention of the kind of professionals we want in Benton County. It makes sense to staff new justice facilities with people who routinely attend to justice principles. Here's the DD iceberg. This model reminds us that most people with developmental and other disabilities are largely unseen by those providing government services. In 2019, some officials were telling us that the prevalence of developmental disability was 2 to 3%. A pediatrician told me it's way higher than that, and the pediatrician is right. The 2 to 3% number is a measure of services taken from the county budget. The true prevalence of developmental disabilities is about 18%. That extrapolates to about 15,000 vulnerable Benton County residents, mostly hidden from your view, but living with developmental disabilities. If those 15,000 souls had their own city, it would be 3 times the population of Paloma. DD services are expensive. Government tends to measure that for which it pays. That is how services became a screening tool through a financial catch-22, which counts those who have already qualified for DD services and already have government support staff to help protect them. Inclusion is both low cost and priceless. This paradox is that early accommodations provided to both this group and this group reduce the need for more accommodations later. For example, taking time to identify and accommodate communication needs at the beginning makes every justice intercept more effective. Early accommodations reduce discriminatory adverse inferences about credibility and provide more accurate public safety risks. Accommodations also reduce the need for expensive services. I want to stay with the iceberg a little bit longer. We've heard from more than one government official that the ADA requires a mandate and a budget. Not true. The ADA requires that anti-discrimination, inclusion, and protection must be built in. The ADA itself is the mandate, and the operating expenses are the budget. In 2020, an ADA coordinator in Benton County told us his department could not provide the additional time needed to identify and accommodate people with developmental disabilities. The Supreme Court has said that is the equivalent of outright exclusion. In 2019, a Benton County justice official said, "We do not have a problem with developmental disabilities," at the very same time that the director of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission said, "The criminal justice system has a blind spot for developmental disabilities." See what happened? The official who thought there was no problem was referring to this group. The CJC director was alluding to the entire iceberg. Next, we'll look briefly at how the ADA is progeny of the 14th Amendment. The long, strange trip to Title II of the ADA. In the beginning was the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule is found in many religions and ancient traditions. You know it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is a moral empathy guideline, but the Golden Rule is insufficient. We need laws. Our next stop is the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thus, Jefferson set a precedent in describing a wide gap between what government promises, equal rights, and what government delivers. I'll call that the Jeffersonian paradox. The Declaration of Independence was insufficient. The next stop is the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, passed in 1868. American democracy only really began to develop traction with the 14th Amendment, but it has been a slog. Section 1 purported to give equal access and equal protection under the law to all citizens. But 153 years later, the Jeffersonian paradox between words and action still plagues us. For me, the real beauty of the 14th Amendment is Section 5. Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation all provisions of this law. See, the Congress of 1868 knew that the 14th Amendment would be insufficient. They seemed to say, "We know this is not enough. Keep working the problem until you get it right, America." 150 years later, and we're still working the problem. The U.S. has slow-walked applying the 14th to those who need it most. It took 52 years to give women the right to vote. It took 100 years to prohibit discrimination based on race, religion, gender, and national origin. And it took 122 years to pass a law prohibiting discrimination based on disabilities. That law, the ADA, is not yet fully enforced. Disability discrimination is akin to racial discrimination, is akin to gender discrimination, and so forth. You commissioners have done a good job of communicating that we must not discriminate against any identity. The practice of anti-discrimination must be a rising tide which floats all equity boats. Now we arrive at the Americans with Disabilities Act, signed in 1990. It prohibits discrimination against qualified people with disabilities. The ADA will enter its 33rd year this July. The ADA is a minimum standard. It is a floor, not a ceiling. Disabilities are to be defined broadly and accommodations applied widely. Reminders, such as the ADA checklist, help us routinely incorporate the anti-discrimination, protection, and inclusion provisions of the ADA in all state and local services, programs, and activities. But the ADA is still a work in progress. This slide contains some Supreme Court quotations, and while I read these, I hope you'll consider when these words were written and what they mean to Benton County. The difficult and intractable problem of disability discrimination warranted additional prophylactic measures. Failure to accommodate persons with disabilities will often have the same practical effect as outright exclusion. A record demonstrating a public entity's failure to accommodate the needs of qualified persons with disabilities may result directly from unconstitutional animus and impermissible stereotypes. These quotations address the Jeffersonian paradox from an opinion in 2004 called Tennessee versus Lane. That was about halfway between the enactment of the ADA and today. The Supreme Court is saying that the ADA may require additional prophylactic measures, such as the ADA checklist, because failure to accommodate people with disabilities is often the same as outright exclusion. They go on to warn that a pattern of failure to accommodate could be interpreted as a sign of unconstitutional animus and impermissible stereotypes. Let's jump ahead from the Supreme Court 17 years ago to Benton County within the last couple of years. Before we do, I want to clarify that this is about process, not an indictment or disparagement of any people. I believe that most government officials in Benton County want to follow the ADA. These misses are for want of an effective reminder system, the ADA checklist. Blind spot 2019. Warning, you are in my blind spot, not a good spot to be in. I wish I could post this sign warning people of my implicit biases. But keep in mind, people with developmental and other cognitive disabilities, have more difficulty reading these kind of signs. And they often lack awareness that they're in our blind spots, leaving them more vulnerable to adverse outcomes because they don't have the same sort of skepticism and experience that you have. The ADA says that it is our duty to check our blind spots, not the person experiencing a disability. In 2019, Benton County completed a criminal justice assessment, collecting input from government officials and community members over more than a year at a cost of more than $1 million. The document is about 120 pages long. There are 2 mentions of mobility disabilities in that document, and exactly 0 mentions of developmental or other cognitive disabilities. In contrast, there are about 100 mentions of mental illness, as though that covered it. Remember, developmental and other cognitive disabilities are not a mental disorder. In response to this oversight, a Benton County justice official said, "We do not have a problem with disabilities in Benton County," apparently referring only to that sliver of the DD iceberg above the surface, protected by support staff, caseworkers, and many Oregon statutes. We can turn a blind spot into a bright spot. In reviewing this case, I believe the first bright spot was discovery that there was an issue to correct. We discovered this by informally applying our own Title II checklist to the published report. We we had been in conversations with Oregon's Criminal Justice Commissioner, Mike Schmidt. Mike asked us how things were going, and we shared with him this assessment and our concern about the oversight. Mike responded, "We have a blind spot in the criminal justice system for developmental disabilities," and suggested we speak with Commissioner Agaro. Commissioner Agaro got us right in, listened, and put us in contact with Gobi consultant Ari Basil-Wagner. Ari began including DD in her sequential intercept model tracing the next week and began incorporating DD into the Benton County Justice System Improvement Project. This also led to our collaboration with Gobi's Center for Behavioral Health and Justice Integration, which is ongoing. When Ari turned the JSIP over to Nick Kurth, he included members of the disability community in the ongoing process improvement plans. So, blind spot turned into a bright spot by using the checklist. The ADA checklist is the stitch in time that will promote including people experiencing developmental and other disabilities at the front end in compliance with Title II. Second example, Blind Spot 2020. Automon pretrial software was purchased by Benton County at considerable cost. It is branded as, quote, innovative case management solution for probation, pretrial, and specialty courts. Sadly, there are no disability or accommodations tracking options with this software. Disabilities were again beneath the surface for the county, the sheriff's office, the specialty courts, and even the software developer. Not recognizing people with disabilities has the same outright effect as excluding them. But there are bright spots. Software team at Automon is willing to work on upgrades and pilot projects which include developmental and other disabilities. The Benton County Sheriff's Office is interested in capturing and tracking accommodations and accurate risk assessments for people with disabilities. Under Sheriff Van Arsdale's leadership, we will work with Jail Captain John Devaney to firm up capturing and tracking disability equity with this software. I hope you'll agree that including people experiencing developmental and other disabilities should be embedded in government processes as a routine rather than exception. To collaborate on that effort, we present the ADA checklist. Here it is in its simplest form, ready to be included as our ICU daily rounds include a checklist for people with critical illness. It can be included when agendas are set or as a question to cover during discussions. It is a commitment to Title II of the ADA. This might be too simple when folks first get started. Let me show you how this works. This is the electronic version. Some people prefer paper. It's available to be printed. If we go to the ADA checklist, this is what we've designed for the checklist. This is the simple version for those lightning rounds that we're used to doing in the ICU and can be done in various committees. But for people just starting out, they may need a more detailed checklist. So we've included this. It starts with the purpose of the checklist and a link to the ADA. It asks the question whether services, programs, or activities in place or under consideration affect people with developmental or other disabilities. I posed this question to DEC President Allison Hopgood, and she said that she can't really think of a county program that doesn't include people with disabilities, and if it doesn't include disabilities, why not? So answer this question and then move on to the question of whether there are optimal accommodations. But don't stop with accommodations, usually thought of as the brick and mortar. Go on to ask a question about stereotypes. Are we doing our best to avoid subjecting people with disabilities to identity-based animus and stereotypes? And finally, do we have a reporting mechanism? Now, for people, I'll just go back here. We also have included here a link to the ADA Equity Coordinator checklist, which is found at ada.gov. And finally, references and resources, which I'll continue to build out over the next couple of weeks. Those include people that are on the DRT. It improves county goals, such as I think it's the 2040 campaign. So that's the checklist in brief, and I have one more slide, which is a proposal. Let's think about including our services, programs, and activities that should include people living with developmental and other disabilities as the rule, not the exception. Check. While we do that, let's consider a 3-month pilot of the checklist to see what things we can measure before and after this intervention. I briefly discussed this with Johan, who's interested in that project, and I think it would be a great pathway for early success for Johan's work as an equity coordinator. Based on those measurements, the checklist can be refined and then deployed so that Title II becomes a Benton best practice. Check. That ends this presentation. Back to you, Commissioner, for further conversation, discussion, criticisms, comments, etc.
Thank you, John. That was, I had looked through the slide deck previously, but hearing you go through it really helped pull things together even better. So I, at this point, would welcome questions from my fellow commissioners and a discussion about what and how we might pilot a checklist, assuming that you all are interested in doing so. So the floor is open.
John, I appreciate the presentation and your long-term efforts. I think you're a good model for how to get things done and trying to develop partnerships wherever possible, and I certainly appreciate that and giving us kind of a map to follow. So I just appreciate the education I've received this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what Commissioner Ojro stated, that it was very helpful to hear you talk and go through it. That really brought it to life for me. And I appreciate hearing about our blind spots, because, you know, if it's a blind spot, how are you going to know unless someone brings it to your attention? So I really appreciate all of this, and I would, you know, be in favor of exploring the checklist and doing a trial, and it sounds like Johan is on board, so I think all that is very good.
I think we have to let Joe Kirby and Lilia and Nick and Jasper speak to, you know, what we're doing in different programs, but then also about what we want to do organizationally. I think my biggest question is what's the most effective pilot, because they're at what level of decision making. And I think we have to take a look at this type of checklist or a varied checklist at different levels of decision making, if you will. Programmatic, this is really obvious where it has a nexus and where we can address some of these areas where we need accommodations or to be more inclusive. When we get up to our level and when policies come to us, sometimes it's really diffuse. So that's where I think I'm struggling most. And then when we get to any sort of a policy like this that's organization-wide but not owned by anyone, that's a problem. So I like the idea of working through our equity coordinator. But I don't see either Lilia or Johan with us this morning, so I'd love to hear from Joe. And I see that Nick Kurth also would like to speak to this.
Oh, you're muted, Joe.
He's having mic trouble.
Okay. May I go ahead and make a comment while he's wrestling with that? Thank you.
Go for it.
I just want to thank John. He has, and I want to share with everyone here, John Gottschall has been a real inspiration to me in the past year. the Justice Systems Improvement Program, of course, is a challenging nut to crack. John's work on developmental disabilities blind spot has been, as I said, just inspirational, very thoughtful, and just a benchmark to me of how progress should occur. I do want to share with all the commissioners that relative to DD blind spot training, and which is specifically Pathways to Justice training, that is budgeted in the JSEP program, and John unfortunately has been struggling with the limitations of COVID to get that training launched, but we're going to make it happen when we can. And that will be a very useful training for not just law enforcement but broader community, and we'll make it happen just as soon as we can, pending changes to limitations imposed by COVID. When John and I began talking about, or when he first approached me on the checklist, and this how you implement it, of course, is kind of the rub, but I remember sharing with John that, our submittal process for Board of Commissioners meetings includes a 2040 checklist. And that was something I shared with John, and hoping that can be kind of a guidance in terms of how we potentially implement the DD checklist. It may not be as broad as 2040, but just having a stopping point in our work and our processes to make sure that we are accounting for developmental disabilities in the ADA checklist. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Nick. I would argue that our 2040 checklist is not particularly effective yet, that it needs to be evaluated and modified in and of itself in order to be effective. And that I am a fan of these kinds of screening tools. Of course, we always have to remember that the tools themselves have blind spots, and we can never consider that they are 100% complete. That's where we get into trouble. But I think that there's a lot of room for discussion about how best and what different scales to deploy this type of checklist so that we make better decisions for all of our community members. Joe just put something into the chat. And he is saying that initially he believes that we need to keep the pilot small, and it will definitely be shepherded or owned within the organization by Johanna Lilia. But we also definitely want to invite Daniel, Jasper, and Suzanne to speak to this topic. So please go ahead. And I see that there's also a comment from John, and I'll let you speak to that in a moment, John.
Hi, everyone. This is Danielle. In response to Joe's comment, I do, we've been working on this in at our advisory committee for months. I do think this is a good resource. I think it does need to be piloted in a small population and figure out how to best utilize this in larger meeting agenda processes. I don't know that I have any specific recommendations for that, but I do think, John has done a lot of work on developing this and having it be as useful as possible for meetings that are happening. And, maybe we start with some really targeted meetings like, I don't know, Commissioner Odro, WCJC or something like that, that has a very targeted population of participants, is a community public meeting, and the agenda is relatively small, rather than try to develop it with like a commissioners meeting where the agenda can be really expansive. So just my thoughts, I think if we could figure out one set of meetings to target for the implementation, I think that's where I would be interested in starting.
Thank you, Danielle. Jasper, Suzanne, and I see Johanna's also popped on. Suzanne?
Thank you, Commissioner Oshiro. I would concur with the colleague.
We are, Suzanne, you are really, really faint.
This might help. Is that better?
Yes.
Microphone in front of face is a good idea, yeah. I agree with a pilot. I would hope that it would be not, small but not too small, because it needs to be meaningful and hopefully teach us something that is transferable to other areas. And I think the duration of that pilot should be carefully thought through so that it is, I guess, long enough to get meaningful information, but not so long that, a year from now we're still in a pilot. I think the idea is to make progress. And although it would be a pilot as presented, as John described so well, it is a concept that has been well tested in many environments successfully. So I'm very much in support of being a part of the next steps, and also excited that Johan, although he may just be learning this today, I don't know, will be engaged in this. I'd also recommend that Rocio Munoz, our health equity coordinator, be connected with it to the extent that she's able to be at this point in time too. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, Commissioner. Sorry I am arriving to this part late. I thought to start at 10, double booked this morning. But I talked to John about this. We were very excited to get this launched, looking for a 3-month pilot or so, and then be able to take that data and go from there. We think this will be really helpful and actually falls in line with some of the other goals for my position for a larger equity checklist. This will be a good transitional piece to get us focused on the ADA requirements, which we need to do anyway, and then be able to start talking about some of the other pieces, areas of the identity that need to also have that support. So this will be a very helpful tool for us.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. Are there other questions for staff or for John or Diane or Jasper? Jasper.
Yeah, I appreciate John's work on this, and I think it is, the awareness of ADA and responsiveness to ADA is something that, is required of all entities. So this is a helpful tool. So I don't know exactly what a pilot looks like, but it is a helpful tool that for helping people do what they need to be doing anyway and kind of help key an awareness and a responsiveness that needs to be there. And John makes a good point in terms of, probably less than 2% of the Benton County population will be formally eligible for, developmental disability services based on kind of state and federal definitions of developmental disability. But probably a majority of people with a diagnosis of autism or cerebral palsy or other developmental disabilities won't be eligible for formal government services, but they still need accommodation under ADA. So that's a really important point that John makes, that the requirements are much farther beyond kind of the formal service delivery system. And anyone who's delivering any kind of service or support in county does have to accommodate people with disabilities.
Thank you, Jasper. Are there additional questions? Don, do you want to tell us about the Collaborative Crisis Response Training Award?
I would, and I want to use it as an example of a couple things. One is that we're already using this ADA checklist when the ARC of Benton County or the Disability Equity Center shows up. We're using it. And so an example of that would be the Collaborative Crisis Response Training Award. We heard about that through the ARC of the U.S., and the Corvallis Police Department was one of 2 sites provided with this award nationally. The award is unique because it incorporates something that Cahoots does not incorporate. It incorporates developmental disability awareness and accommodations into crisis response, which is really, so satisfying. And the reason that we got that award is because we're already using this checklist with, Chief Hurley, Chief Rubin, Captain Goodwin, and now Sheriff Van Arsdale. And so we don't, some people said, should we wait? We don't have to. People can advocate for Title II when they show up in a meeting. But the point's about measurements for good ones, and I do want to reiterate that when you look at studies that evaluate checklists, for example, central line infection rates, and central line infections should be a never event. And there are a few things that you can do, like bring the protective equipment to the bedside and bury the central line kit under the protective equipment, so people have to deal with putting it on before they get to the line. Just simple things like that. It takes about a month to demonstrate effectiveness. And once people are used to doing that, it takes no time because it becomes part of the process, really. It takes a few minutes. And the results are sustainable over years, but that curve of efficacy kind of goes up really quickly and then it sort of levels off. And so I think that if we can do the same thing with ADA equity issues and other equity issues, particularly as we roll out this facilities levy and tie that to the idea of equity, that's what Nick and I have done, and that's how we got this training award. And so we're already getting traction with this.
That's fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up, and it is very exciting. I know Chief Hurley is thrilled to be one of only 2 jurisdictions in this arena, along with the rest of us here in the Benton County communities. I wanted to note that Joe is suggesting that he meet with Johan, Lilia, Suzanne, Danielle, and Jasper to discuss a pilot and to bring together a plan back to the Board of Commissioners by the end of June. So, Pat, Nancy, does that sound like a good plan to you?
Yes, it's, I think, important to kind of continue the momentum and have some specifics that we're going to implement.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Excellent. And John, when you are suggesting bringing in ADA coordinators at some point, who are you referring to specifically, and can you elaborate?
Sure. So every entity with more than 50 employees has to have an ADA coordinator under the law. Those ADA coordinators that's often sort of a tag-on thing, like, hey, we have this ADA obligation. Who do we give it to? And it's sort of the last person not to step back that ends up getting it. So the ADA coordinators, we often don't know who those people are, and they don't necessarily have a lot of practice in the purpose and the deployment of the ADA. They may be thinking, well, we have a ramp at the front door, we're good. And so those ADA coordinators, I think, may, perhaps under Johan and Lilia's direction, may be a way to create, have everybody working at the top of license, basically.
That makes sense. As you point out, I don't know who our ADA coordinators are. I suspect that Paul Walsinger is one of them as our facilities manager, but I don't know. Okay, any more questions and discussion?
I just want to thank everybody so much for listening and for the interaction. And I just really appreciate you and your attention to this and other things here in Benton County. Good job.
Well, thank you. We can't do it without the team, and you all in the community have been fantastic in terms of being right there to show us our blind spots on a regular basis. That's something that we all need. So much appreciated. Okay. If there are no further questions, we will move on in our agenda, and we will look forward to June. And I hope that as our internal team moves forward, that we continue to involve John and Diane. And I see that we have Dave Merrill from OSU here, the ADA coordinator at Oregon State University. He's also put his contact information in the chat. Says he'd be happy to help out wherever he's useful as well. So fantastic. I think there's a lot of potential synergy here. And I look forward to seeing where we go from here. Much appreciated. The next item on our agenda is our routine once-a-month information sharing. And I would like to invite us to begin this time around with Commissioner Malone.
All right. First topic, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is emails. And before pandemic, there was some talk, and so this is probably new to Nancy, but developing a tool with IT. I think Derek had some preliminary suggestions, and the problem is emails, it isn't always clear who they're going to. It may just have an individual's name, but go to half a dozen people within our organization, and you can't see that. Specific that I have a question about, did either of you receive an email from Kay Sams last week about, okay, and that I use that as an example. It just had my name, and I think have some connection with her in the past. So, but her concern was about glyphosate and wanting the county to ban that, and we don't have that authority. But anyway, that's I would when things get back to normal, I would like to maybe put that on Derek's agenda, just as a tidying up our communication tools. Reply versus reply to all, and I'll pick on you, Zan. You like reply to all, and sometimes it's just a thank you to whoever is you're conversing with, and I remember Lilia talking about her 1,700 unread emails, and I know Joe struggles keeping up, and I'm in that boat also, and I would appreciate if it's just a kind of a short acknowledgement that you receive something and thanking them. I don't think that needs to go to the whole list of people on the email chain. And maybe this is for Nancy, but I think I figured out recently that emails with a .com address, took me a while to figure out, well, I mean, I don't really buy anything, and generally they're selling something, and so they get deleted, generally get deleted pretty quickly. Okay, that's that topic. Let's see. Thinking about getting back to normal, and but what a wonderful job, health department, thinking about the response to the pandemic in the last year, and especially the vaccination efforts that's been going on probably since February, and that Benton County has the highest vaccination rate in the state, and I would like a little more awareness of our community, what a wonderful job that we've been doing, and I would love to have something like a letter from the governor recognizing these efforts. I think our testing in Benton County has been way above average. In some ways, we were penalized for that, but on the vaccination effort, that's just been, to me, really impressive from the get-go, and that we have the results to prove that we know what we're doing, and we have excellent staff, and have managed to come up with probably thousands of volunteers to get this effort moving forward. And I guess I would like some recognition for these efforts. And maybe at some point have a physical gathering where we could do a little celebration. Last thing, I noticed our budget committee, Javier Cervantes is moving from LBCC to the Albany school system. Similar position, different agency. Thought that was, just noticed that in the news, and thought I'd pass that along in case that wasn't common knowledge. I think that's what I have.
Thank you, Pat. Nancy?
So I don't have too much that's burning for you guys. I will say, I don't know if it's because I'm new and people don't have my email yet, but I'm getting way less emails than I used to get as a city councilor. I used to get at least, a couple hundred a week. And I, just thinking about, Zan's responsibility as the chair, I think it makes sense if she replies to everyone sometimes, but then I can see, as city councilors, we were all told don't reply all because of quorum issues, potential quorum issues. And usually it was the mayor's job to, respond. If it was just to send to everyone, it was the mayor's job. So Zan, this is a different model. It's kind of like a hybrid between the mayor and you're the chair and a commissioner. So yeah, I don't really have any suggestions there, just kind of thinking out loud about it. So I attended the Monroe City Council meeting last night virtually. They're meeting in public, but they only have room for about 8 people. So I sat out and just watched on my computer. However, I could not hear anybody except for the the city administrator. But I did get to introduce myself and say hello, and offer to chat with councilors. So that was good. And I know our sheriff presented a plan for law enforcement for them again. So again, I couldn't hear what they said, but, uh-oh, can you guys hear me? Am I frozen? I'm just gonna keep talking like I'm not frozen, and that's about it anyway, so I'll just, I guess, not talk anymore.
We can hear you.
I can hear you okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, and I'm glad you made it to the Monroe City Council meeting remotely. It sounds like it was a little challenging, and I was thrilled to hear from Sheriff Ben Arcel the other day that he's engaging regularly with both Monroe and Adair Village. On the email topic, I'm sorry that I'm overloading email boxes. I try to be really judicious about when I use reply all. And obviously I am not always successful. So forgive me, I will try and be better about that. I just try hard to acknowledge receiving messages, especially when they come from staff. But I am aware that no one wants an overloaded email box and needs to just spend all their time deleting an email. I agree with you, Pat, with respect to the answering constituent mail question. And on that particular topic, glyphosate and animal issues, that combination is the first time we've seen that combination of issues put together. But it is a topic that we've heard about a lot since I have been on board. And I do have it on my list to circle back and respond. So I will copy you on whatever I respond. And that's one of those areas where I feel it's really important. Just if I do respond to someone, I want to make sure that you're all in the loop so that we kind of have a sense for what we're communicating to members of the community. So I would welcome more discussion on that topic, but I'd like to just bring up a couple of things before we do go back to that. And one is that later today, I think Joe will also be able to attend, I'm not certain, will be attending a Lynn Benton Funders meeting that is a routine meeting of United Way, the United Way hosts, to bring together different philanthropic partners in the community, Benton Community Foundation, the Samaritan Foundation, sometimes OSU Foundation, others. But this particular meeting was prompted by a conversation I had with Ms. Blanca about the American Rescue Plan dollars and the fact that the various jurisdictions have those funds. Some of those monies are really to be spent to support community members, either as we have in the past with economic issues or with early childhood education, housing, homelessness, mental health, and health, and wanted to have a broader conversation about how we might use some of those funds in a synergistic way across different bodies to add up to bigger change rather than smaller change. So this is just a very preliminary conversation. I suspect that Joe will probably be the one that will be most involved moving forward, but I'll be participating in that this afternoon at least to help launch that discussion. On another note, I received an update from Randy Moore and Hannah Balva at the Council of Governments about the Stand By Me program. And that is basically, we lost Nancy. She may have lost connectivity. But I guess I will proceed anyway, and we'll circle her back in. The program has, wait just a sec while Nancy comes back. Okay. The Stand By Me program was supported in its first year through Benton County economic development dollars, actually through a housing fund that was from home loan program under the old CDBG dollars that we had back when. And we figured that financial skills and fluency training program was a very good use for those CDBG monies to help community members become more financially skilled and able to manage their affairs as an ultimate social determinant of health and of well-being. So we invested in that program. That first year has lapsed, and right now what the status of the program is that the COG has established, as you know, reopened one of their 501c3s to spearhead the program. Hannah Valva, community member, is the chair of that board. And Hyman from our staff is a board member participating in the development of that program. The Council of Governments is looking now for a way to continue to support the program as it continues to develop. And what they ideally would like is for Lincoln County, and Benton County to each put in some funds in order to be able to support a coordinator for the program and to service that hub across the 3-county region. They have trainers for Stand By Me working in various organizations at this point. They've focused on training their own COG staff initially because they didn't have to, that was the easiest way to get started. They're also working very closely with Strengthening Rural Families in order to extend the training out into the community further, and with KidCo Head Start as a partner as well. So we will see a formal request coming from them for funding. I have a kind of a sneak peek at what they are thinking of asking, but that's all I have so far. I think, if I recall correctly, it's in the vicinity of about a $40,000 a year request. But I can send along the information that was shared with me, which gives us a good status report on the program, and I would like to just include it on a future agenda to be able to discuss at greater length. So that's where we are with respect to that program. There's also some exciting news. The Stand By Me program did receive their first philanthropic grant award from the Oregon Community Foundation, and that will focus on expanding the program for trainers in the bilingual component of the program to address the need for financial knowledge in the Latinx community here across the Benton and Lincoln County areas. So that's more in the nature of an update, but also just to get a kind of a sense for direction.
That's the $35,000 grant.
The one from Oregon Community Foundation?
Yes.
36,000, yes.
Good.
Yep. So I'll share those that information with you, the email that I have, and I will. What I would like to be able to do is to indicate to our fellow commissions in Lynn and Lane County, not Lane, Lynn and Lincoln counties, that we are supporting this program and would invite them to join us. That would be my ideal way to make that request. So onward, I don't have any other issues. Is there more discussion on the topic of email volume and controlling that, or are we good on that?
I have guess it'll be a couple more comments. I'm not quite sure how long ago it was, but it used to be the commissioner's office, commissioners received a lot of phone calls directly from constituents or whoever wanted to call. And with the menu, you dial in and get directed to specific departments. The phone call volume to commissioners dropped a lot, and I'm wondering if we could use that as a model for the email project, but one specific and another one just came in. These are from our Republican friends somewhere in the state. Palmer, last name begins with V, came in late last night, and we just got one from Alexandria Rowe. It's the same email, and I mean, word for word. In Yamhill County, they're passports, vaccine passports, and I like to, and Zan, you can handle it however you want, but it seems like a kind of short, and if they're going to send us the same email letter, we ought to be able to send them the same response, and I forget what the last issue was, but a similar kind of, and I think Palmer is a familiar name, and he signs himself as a real estate person, and so just, I guess the theme is how to be efficient, acknowledge that we received it, and you know, and they may be copying this from something that's going around the country, but just I don't think it's worth, personally, I don't think it's worth a lot of time to craft individual responses to form letters. But that's my 2 cents worth.
That's typically our stance, is if we get a form letter, make it a form response. I have engaged with Mr. Villagi in the past. Villagi, I don't know how he pronounces it. And he does respond thoughtfully, but I think that he is appears to be a bit of a leader in terms of some of that letter writing campaign. So I understand, and I concur.
Well, and just that we respectfully disagree with number 4. Kate Brown is perpetuating fraud and a felony, and this is terrible. And anyway, I don't think we agree with that.
No.
Well, and Pat, to your point about getting emails that are maybe best directed to staff, you know, it could be helpful on our website if we had one spot that was like, you know, come here, and are you looking for this, or this, and then people can click that link, you know, and get to where they need to go. I think the city has a report a problem, but it's more than just problems. I don't know, you know, different wording might be good, but hopefully that might be on the horizon. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that one-stop report an issue, a register of comment or something would be really helpful, because that is part of what we end up doing, is playing a little bit of traffic control, and so.
Well, and I like the.
If I can just interject real quick to make sure that you are aware of a project that we do have on the books. It's called our Contact Management System Project. This is something that's been on our books for 2 years now, and it's a project that Lilia Neville is responsible for advancing, and we know what she's been working on the last year. I do anticipate that she'll be rejoining us as of July 1st in terms of her normal job responsibilities, if you will. But the contact management system and advancing that really is an important issue, I think, for all of us, because I do think that there is confusion out there, and that we're not as efficient as we can be with managing inquiries, requests, complaints. And so just to remind you that we've actually talked about this topic before. Unfortunately, we just haven't made any progress on it at this point, but you know, emails and how they are filtered or how they're managed is part of, it's just one venue regarding communication. Obviously, there's other modes of communication as well. And so just to let you know, we haven't forgotten about that. And once Lily is back, beginning of July, we'll begin to redirect her attention to these other priorities. So I just have to apologize for us not advancing that one sooner. It does continue to be a challenge for all of us. And while I can't tell you that a solution is imminent in July, I can tell you that we can begin to prioritize that issue once Lily gets back.
That sounds great. And I know that with the website update, the content update, that's another opportunity to add in this kind of utility.
Exactly, and then those go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they go hand in hand.
Okay. Joe, do you have updates?
I was just going to, for Commissioner Wise, I can tell you that I get probably 800 to 1,000 emails for every phone call I get. And so phone calls are just not that common any longer. And, I mean, my email box over the last 5 years has just exploded, and my voicemails have gone way down, way down. Yeah, so I don't think that's just unique to the commissioners. I think it's just, how business is done these days. So I do have a couple of other items, commissioners, to touch on, but I'll wait until you finished your dialogue.
I was just going to say to Nancy that I probably receive 3 or 4 phone calls on my work phone per month. But my mobile phone, on the other hand, maybe a half dozen a week. So it does seem to be predominantly email. It's just the mode. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to interject unless you folks were done. Just a couple of items. Number one, IT was gracious enough to come down and rescue me and get my mic working again, so I apologize for that in the earlier discussion. In answer to the question, who's our ADA coordinator? That is Erin Pena. Erin works in our HR office, and I acknowledge, from what I could tell, what John was suggesting, to make sure we included our ADA coordinator in any discussion, and we're happy to do that. Also, Commissioner Malone, you mentioned a recognition of some sort. I've asked Stephanie Hurst to connect with our Rewards and Recognition Committee. That's a committee under our HR umbrella that Jesus facilitates. That group meets once a month. And I've asked Stephanie to connect with that group and to begin to formulate what I'll call it a shindig. I'm not sure where that word comes from, but it sounds fun. And but we would like to have some type of recognition event where all county employees are invited to attend. I've been have had that in mind for a number of months now. It's just about the when. Is that responsible for us to do? And so Stephanie is going to be working with Rewards and Recognition, and we can certainly plug in any ideas that commissioners have to Stephanie and to that group for them to consider. But I really do think a large recognition event, when it's safe for all of us to get back together, would be of great value, so we can recognize all of our employees, but then also some of the folks that went above and beyond. So I would anticipate, August might be the earliest we would have something like that. It could be later. Stephanie's going to be working with our health department to make sure that we are in alignment with CDC guidelines, OHA, and that we're not doing anything that would appear to be irresponsible by getting large groups together. So we're probably going to have to wait for a couple more months before we can make this happen.
Well, and the governor is, I think, guaranteed that the Benton Roundup, I think that's early September, is a go. And I don't think she can take that one back. That's a huge event in a modest-sized community, and like any big event, it takes months to do the preparation. And so I think that's a pretty good, that the governor has confidence that by early September that we will be open for events, and it could be sooner than that, but that she made, I guess I was just a week ago, made that quite clear that we're on track and should hit 70% vaccination rate statewide by, at least by the end of June, which is a week from now is June, so that's not that far off. And on the recognition event, I would like to see both an internal and external component. I think it's important. We just had the vote on renewing the levy last week and let the community know what we're doing, and that we have been doing a great job in general, but especially the past year. And I think we should not be shy about getting the word out that we have great staff and volunteers, and this has been an extraordinary effort, and I think some recognition is definitely due.
Agreed. Thank you for that feedback. And then I just have one other item I'd like to share with the board before you adjourn. This is a follow-up to our meeting with City Council last week relative to the HOPE recommendations. So our current plan of attack, just so the board is aware, is that on June 8th, which is a goal-setting meeting for the board, Julie, Rena, Suzanne, and myself will be joining the board, and we'll be reviewing what the city identified as their priorities relative to those recommendations, and also who they feel should lead that respective recommendation, if you will, or response to that recommendation. So our goal will be on June 8th with the board to see if you're in agreement with the city's priorities or if our priorities are different, and to also speak to the item as to who should lead the implementation for these respective recommendations. So that will be on June 8th. And then on June 15th, we will bring back to your normal Board of Commissioners meeting the HOPE recommendations, where you'll be asked to formally accept those recommendations by making a motion. So that will be on your June 15th meeting. The city plans to do that at their June 7th meeting, and we would prefer to meet with the board on June 8th, and then subsequent to that, adopt a resolution accepting the recommendation by June 15th. And then, of course, we'll go back to the meeting with the city council on July 1st. So that was just an update that I thought was important for the board to be aware of.
Thank you. That's helpful. I look forward to goal setting.
Commissioners, that's all I have for you today.
I want to say that I did note that our CFO position was formally posted because I received a copy of it via text from a colleague, so it's out there in the world.
We did launch the CFO recruitment on our target was May 15th. I think it actually went live on May 17th. We also have, just so you're aware of that schedule, there is, if it's not on your schedule yet, it should be showing up any time now. There are 2 days, the middle of July, that we're looking at the finalist round of interviews where we will include the board. And so I think it's July 16th and 17th or something thereabouts, but I did ask Stephanie and or one of the other administrative staff to put those dates on hold. I don't know if we'll have 1 finalist or 3. Don't know at this point. The first review of applications, yeah, Commissioner wants 3, Malone wants 3. Yep, I would prefer that as well. And but the first review of applications, I think, is June 21st and 22nd.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you're putting Stephanie in charge of the shindig. That staff lunch event that she organized a couple months back, that I was skeptical before it started, and my skepticism was unwarranted. She did a great job, and doing something like that virtually. Anyway, looking forward to what she can come up with for getting us physically back together here in a couple months.
Thank you.
Okay, if there is no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
See you at 1.